I noticed small charges on my card. $10 here, 20 there. I thought it was just subscriptions I'd forgotten about. But then I saw cash missing from my own drawer. And when I looked closer, the withdrawals had my son's names on them. I didn't know it yet, money was only the beginning. My wife passed away in late November. The cold was everywhere outside, in the house, and in my chest. 32 years of marriage ended in one night at a Seattle hospital. The house felt so empty that even the hum of the fridge sounded louder than it used to. I ate soup for 3 days straight out of one pot because I couldn't see the point of cooking for just myself. My son started visiting more often. Tom would sit on the couch, scrolling on his phone. Josh brought me coffee from Starbucks and set it down in front of me. "Dad, you need to eat and drink properly. We're here." I was grateful. That first winter, their visits felt like salvation. I looked at them and said, "You're all I've got left." The house smelled of old pine from the wreath on the door and dust from carpets I hadn't vacuumed in weeks. We spent evenings in silence. Sometimes Tom would flip on the television, but more often he just scrolled. One evening he said, "Dad, let's link your card to delivery apps. It'll be easier. Food, medicine, everything straight to your door." I nodded. Back then, I trusted them completely. At first, the charges were small. $12, $19, then $45. I thought, Netflix, Spotify, some service I forgot about. The girl at the bank told me it looked like subscriptions. I sighed and waved it off. What else could it be? In spring, I noticed cash missing from the kitchen drawer where I always kept 20s for the lawn guy or pizza delivery. I told myself, "You're getting old, Richard. You just spent it and forgot." I wanted to believe that. Evenings I'd sit on the porch. Neighbors, the Johnsons, the Millers laughed with their kids, grilling meat in the yard. Their laughter carried across the cold air. I sat on the step and felt like a ghost, a widower. No laughter, no smell of barbecue, just bills and the hum of an empty house. My sons started doing more than bringing coffee. They sat at my computer, explaining they'd help pay bills online. Tom said, "This way's easier, Dad. One click, and it's done." I smiled and thanked them. I thought it was care. Then in July, the statement came. $349 for some gaming service. The name I couldn't even pronounce. I sat in the kitchen, lamplight reflecting in my half-empty teacup, and stared at the numbers. A game. A subscription. A recurring payment. I decided it had to be a bank error. Or a virus. I put the statement back in the envelope and shut the drawer. But that night, lying in bed, sweat gathered on my temples. Something wasn't right. The next morning, Tom dropped by randomly, as he called it. He brought donuts, left his phone on the table. The screen lit up, and I saw the same icon from the statement. The exact same one. I froze. My chest went cold, but I didn't say a word. We ate donuts in silence. He scrolled through the news. I stared at the sugar falling onto the tablecloth and thought, sugar can be brushed off. But can you brush off this feeling? Back then, I didn't know this was only the beginning. That the small charges and missing cash weren't mistakes. They were a habit. First little things, then more. I was only starting to see the pattern, but the picture wasn't clear yet. I kept sitting on that porch at night, listening to other families laugh, telling myself, they're my sons. They wouldn't hurt me. But inside the house, on the coffee table, the family photo album stayed shut. I hadn't opened it since the funeral. Every evening I thought I might, but my hand always stopped just above the cover. One night, I sat by the window with the lamp off, waiting for a call that never came. The only sound was the clock ticking in the hallway. I told myself I could still trust them. But the silence in that house answered louder than any phone, and somewhere deep down, I already knew the truth. The phone finally rang late one morning. I was at the kitchen table with a half-cold mug of coffee, the newspaper folded but unread. Tom's name lit up the screen. "Dad. Hey." His voice too cheerful. Too quick. "Listen. I used your card for gas last night. Just a small amount. You'll see it on the statement." "No big deal." I said nothing at first, just watched the steam fade from my coffee. gas, a subscription, small amounts. They all blurred together now. Dad? He pressed. It's fine, I said, though my throat felt tight. He exhaled with relief, like he'd been waiting for permission. You're the best. I'll swing by later, okay? When he hung up, the kitchen felt heavier. The fridge hummed. The clock ticked in the hall. And the only sound from outside was a delivery truck moving past my window. Ordinary noises. But they pressed against me like walls. That evening, Josh showed up with takeout. The smell of fried chicken filled the living room. He laughed easily, asked me about the Mariners game, handed me a plate like nothing was wrong. While he talked, I noticed the way his jacket bulged at the pocket. A quick flash of my wallet corner, the leather I'd carried for 20 years. He must have slipped it in earlier when he hugged me at the door. I didn't say a word. I only reached for a napkin and let the plate grow cold in my lap. Later, when the house was quiet again, I opened the drawer where I kept my cash. Empty. Not even a single 20. I sat on the edge of the bed holding the drawer in my hands, as if weight alone could explain its loss. Through the window I saw the Johnsons' kids running across their yard, chasing fireflies with jars. Their shouts carried into the warm night air. I closed the curtain. I wasn't sure what stung worse, the theft itself, or how normal it was beginning to feel. The next morning I stood in line at the bank. The lobby smelled faintly of disinfectant and paper. A mother in front of me was teaching her child how to sign a deposit slip. Her voice was gentle, patient. When it was my turn, the teller asked what I needed. I'd like a full statement, I said. My own voice sounded foreign to me. She printed a stack of pages and slid them across the counter. You'll see every transaction here, Mr. Harris. I sat in the car outside, reading line after line. Gaming subscriptions. Online orders I never placed. A hotel charge from Portland, 3 months back. I felt the paper tremble in my hands, though the summer air was still. That night I placed the statements on the coffee table beside the unopened photo album. I didn't have the courage to open either one, but I knew both told the same story. The papers stayed on the coffee table for days. I walked past them every morning, setting down my mug beside the envelope, never opening it. It was easier to stare at the closed album than to face what I already suspected. One afternoon, Josh called. Dad, we should talk about the house, he said casually, like he was asking about the weather. I gripped the phone tighter. What about it? He cleared his throat. It's too much for you alone. The bills. The space. Tom and I were thinking, maybe you could move somewhere smaller, more manageable. There's this nice community home near Bellevue. We could handle the house for you. The words fell like ice water down my back. Community home. Handle the house. I told him I'd think about it, then hung up before he could say more. That evening I sat by the kitchen window. Outside, the neighbors were stringing lights along their porch, kids darting in and out with laughter sharp as bells. Inside, my own house smelled of reheated soup. The only light came from the lamp over the sink. I touched the edge of the envelope again, then pushed it away. Instead, I opened the fridge, poured myself a glass of water, and stood there in the humming quiet. I thought of my wife. How she used to hum while washing dishes. How she'd say, "Don't let them push you around, Richard." Not even the boys. Her voice felt closer in that silence than the sound of my son's laughter had in months. A week later, Tom dropped by. He didn't bring donuts this time. He brought a stack of papers folded in a manila envelope. Just some information, he said, sliding it onto the table. Options for senior living. Nothing final. The envelope sat there between us. I didn't touch it. He reached for my coffee cup, moved it closer to me like he was tidying, like he owned the table. I studied his hands. The same hands that once clutched my shoulders after his mother's funeral, shaking. Now they placed papers in front of me with steady purpose. I wanted to argue, to shout that I wasn't done yet. But the words never left my mouth. When he left, I opened the manila envelope. Brochures. Smiling elderly couples on manicured lawns. Safe. Affordable. Comfortable. I read each word slowly, as if it might turn into something else. But the message was clear. They weren't visiting to help. They were visiting to replace me. I put the brochures back, shoved the envelope into the trash, and sat down in the dark. Later that night, I turned on my banking app again. I hadn't done that in weeks. My hands shook as I scrolled. More charges. Restaurants. Movie tickets. Purchases tagged with their names in the statement. It was all there in black and white. I closed the phone, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the ceiling. The plaster crack above the light fixture looked like a branch splitting in two. I wondered if that was what family was becoming for me, a crack widening, ready to split apart completely. The house was silent, except for the clock in the hall. Tick. I sat in the kitchen long after midnight, hands flat on the table, waiting for I don't know what. Maybe for the phone to ring. Maybe for an apology. Maybe just for the sound of someone walking through the door. Not with brochures, not with excuses, but with honesty. The phone stayed silent, and in that silence, I realized whatever was left of trust had already been stolen. Just like the cash, just like the card. The days blurred after that. I moved through the house like a shadow, eating when I remembered, sleeping when I couldn't fight it off any longer. The brochures never made it out of the trash, but their images stayed in my head. Smiling strangers in tidy rooms, as if loneliness could be staged and photographed. One night, I found myself at the kitchen table again, the stack of bank statements spread out under the lamp. The pages smelled faintly of toner and dust. I traced the charges with my finger, each line a wound I hadn't felt when it happened. Gas stations I never stopped at. Restaurants I never entered. A pair of sneakers ordered online. The more I read, the heavier the silence became. It pressed against my ears until I could almost hear the sound of their laughter. Not the laughter of boys in my backyard years ago, but of men congratulating themselves when they thought I wouldn't notice. I pushed the papers away and sat back. The ceiling creaked as the wind shifted outside. Somewhere, a dog barked. Ordinary sounds. But in that moment, they felt like signals from a world I no longer belonged to. The next morning, I tried to confront Tom, in my own way. He had come by again, always with that careless ease, as if the house was half his already. I watched him move through the kitchen, the way he opened cabinets without asking. I almost said it then. Almost told him I knew. I wanted to argue, to shout that I wasn't done yet. But the words never left my mouth. Instead, I asked him if he remembered the night his mother taught him to drive, the way she held her breath at every turn. He laughed, a short laugh. Not really listening. He was already scrolling his phone. When he left, I stayed at the window long after his car pulled away. Outside, the Johnson kids were riding bikes in the street, their parents clapping when one of them managed to turn without wobbling. I pressed my forehead against the cold glass. I was invisible to them. A man behind the curtain, fading. That night I finally opened the photo album. The smell of old paper hit me as I flipped the first page. My wife's smile, frozen in snapshots of summers, birthdays, Christmas mornings, the boys as children, their arms around each other, cheeks sticky with cake. I closed the album quickly, almost in shame. It wasn't the past that hurt. It was the difference between then and now, the distance I couldn't cross. I left the album on the table, open this time. And for the first time since she died, I locked the front door before going to bed. The first night I locked the door, I didn't sleep well. Every creak in the hallway sounded louder. Every gust of wind rattling the window felt like someone testing the handle. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling crack, tracing it in the dark until the shape blurred. In the morning, I wrote the date on a yellow notepad. Just the date, nothing else. I left it on the kitchen counter, next to the bank statements. I wasn't sure why I did it. Maybe I needed proof that the days were still mine to keep. That afternoon, Josh showed up again, too soon after Tom's last visit. He opened the fridge without asking, pulled out the carton of milk. "This is almost empty," he said, like an inspector. "You should let us stock things for you." I nodded, though I didn't mean it. He slipped 2 bills from his pocket and left them on the counter. I knew they were mine. 20s. Folded the way I kept them in the drawer. I recognized the folds in the bills. They were mine. But I stayed quiet, Better to write it down than hear his excuse. When he left, I added another line to the notepad. Cash missing. 2 bills returned. My handwriting shook, but I pressed the pen harder until the paper almost tore. At night, I sat in the living room with the lights off. The neighbors across the street were watching a movie. I could see the flicker through their curtains. Laughter drifted out when someone opened their door. I held my breath, as if silence might make me invisible. The house smelled faintly of old coffee grounds. The kind of smell that lingers even after you've taken the trash out. I wondered if grief had a smell too. Something that seeps into the walls and stays. The next morning, Tom came. No donuts this time either. He circled the rooms, his eyes scanning, lingering on the framed photos along the hallway. My wife's smile, the boys, as children. "Dad," he said, his tone flat. "You shouldn't be alone here. It's not good for you." I looked at the photo of my wife, her hand resting on Tom's shoulder when he was no older than 10. He had her smile then. He doesn't now. "I'm managing," I said. He shook his head slowly, like he already knew better. "Just think about it." When he left, I went to the drawer again. Empty. Completely empty. Even the loose change was gone. I sat on the edge of the bed, holding the drawer in my lap. The smell of old wood filling my nose. I wrote on the notepad, "Drawer cleared. All of it." The pen scratched loud in the quiet room. Too loud. That night, I placed the notepad inside the photo album. Between the pictures of Christmas morning and a summer picnic, my list of losses waited like a new page in our history. And for the first time, I felt less like a victim and more like a witness. The next days I wrote more. Small notes on the yellow pad, each one a stone dropped into still water. Dates, amounts, missing bills, words they used. I kept my handwriting steady, like I was proving to myself I hadn't lost control. One morning the pad wasn't where I had left it. I searched the counter, the table, even the floor under the chair. Nothing. My chest tightened until I saw it again back on the counter. But moved. Someone had touched it. It hadn't fallen. Someone had opened it, then set it back down too neatly. When Tom stopped by that afternoon, I watched him too closely. He smiled, too casual, asking if I'd thought more about downsizing. His eyes flicked once toward the counter. I kept mine steady on him. After he left, I slipped the pad back into the photo album. Between the photographs of Christmas lights and torn wrapping paper, my record waited. Hidden. That night I sat in the dark living room, the curtains half drawn. Across the street, the Millers had visitors, their driveway full, their porch bright with laughter. I could hear the clink of glasses when someone opened the door. The sound of living. My house smelled of old dust and laundry detergent that had gone sour in the bottle. The air felt heavy, unmoving. I thought of calling anyone, but my list on the pad felt like the only company I had. Days later, Josh came by with coffee. He placed it on the table and leaned in. "Dad, me and Tom talked. We're serious about the house. We could make sure you're taken care of. No more bills, no more stress." I looked at him, the steam from the cup curling between us. The same son who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed now stood there asking for my house. I didn't answer right away. Instead, I opened a drawer and slid the stack of brochures back across the table. "I've seen these," I said. My voice sounded calmer than I felt. Josh's smile faltered. For a second, just a second, I saw something in his eyes, impatience. Maybe even anger. Then it was gone. He patted my shoulder too firmly and said, "Just think about it." When he left, I sat down again at the counter, the untouched coffee cooling in front of me. I opened the album, found the page where my notes rested. I added another line. "They are planning together." The pen scratched against the paper, the sound sharp in the silence. I closed the album, pressed my palm flat on its cover. It felt less like a memory book now, and more like evidence. I started hiding the album in different places. Under the bed, behind the coats in the hall closet. Once, inside the oven when it was cold. Each time I moved it, I told myself it was safer. Each time, I still felt exposed. Tom came by on a Thursday. He lingered longer than usual, drifting from room to room, touching things that weren't his. The top of the dresser, the edge of the mantel. When he picked up the snow globe my wife had bought in Seattle, he shook it once, then set it down like it was worthless. "You can't keep all this stuff forever," he said, his back to me. I didn't answer. The snowflakes inside the globe swirled and settled. That was answer enough. After he left, the house smelled faintly of his cologne, too sharp, too foreign. I opened the windows even though the night air was cold, just to let it out. Across the street, the Millers' porch light clicked off. Their house quieted, their family settling down together. I stood in the draft of my own window, the curtain brushing my arm, and wondered when mine had stopped being a family at all. The next morning, I found the drawer in my desk open. The contents weren't gone, but shifted. Pens, envelopes, the old checkbook. Someone had looked. My stomach turned cold. I wrote it down on the yellow pad. Desk drawer searched. That night, I couldn't sit still. I walked from room to room, touching doorknobs, checking locks. The house groaned with every step, like it was protesting. Finally, I stopped in the living room, the album heavy in my hands. I sat with it open on my lap, staring at the pages. The boys' faces, birthdays and vacations, their mother smiling between them. I pressed the notepad flat against one of the photographs, ink bleeding faintly onto the glossy paper. Evidence pressed against memory. The refrigerator hummed in the kitchen. The clock in the hall ticked steady. Normal sounds, but I felt like I was already on trial in my own home, building a case no one had asked for. When I finally went to bed, I locked the door again. Then I slid the album under my pillow. Not for comfort. For protection. Sleeping with the album under my pillow didn't bring rest. The edge dug into my shoulder. The weight pressed against my ear. Every time I turned, I felt it there. Like a secret I couldn't put down. In the morning, the imprint of the cover was still faint on my cheek. I stared at it in the mirror, tracing the line with my finger, wondering if guilt left marks too. Josh came by that afternoon. He knocked only once before stepping inside, his voice loud in the hallway. "Dad, you didn't answer your phone." He held it up like evidence. Missed calls. I told him I'd been sleeping. He looked around, scanning the room, his eyes too sharp. "You should keep your phone on. What if something happens?" I nodded, but my hand tightened in my pocket around the notepad. While he talked, I noticed his jacket sleeve brushing the edge of the counter, closer and closer to the stack of mail. My mail. I moved it before he could. His smile didn't falter, but I saw his eyes flicker. After he left, the air felt stale, as if he had taken the oxygen with him. I opened the back door to the yard. Cold air rushed in, carrying the smell of damp leaves. I stood there, breathing it in, until my fingers numbed. Across the fence, the neighbors were grilling, even in the chill. Smoke curled into the evening, children chasing each other around the yard. A woman's laugh rang out, easy and full. I watched until the smoke stung my eyes. That night, I sat at the kitchen table with the album open and the notepad beside it. I started listing not just what they took, but what they said. Their words, their gestures, the way their eyes moved when they thought I wasn't looking. The pages filled slowly. Move somewhere smaller. Handle the house. You shouldn't be alone. Each phrase written like an indictment. The refrigerator clicked on. The light above the sink buzzed faintly. The house sounded tired. The way I felt. Before bed, I slipped the album back under the pillow. This time, I didn't hope for rest. I hoped only that it would still be there in the morning. The days grew colder. Mornings carried a thin frost across the lawn, the kind that made the grass crunch underfoot. I noticed it only through the window. I didn't step outside much anymore. One evening, Tom came by with a smile stretched too tight. He set down a folder on the kitchen table. "Just some options," he said, sliding it toward me. Inside were printouts of condos and retirement communities, neat columns of costs and amenities. I flipped through them slowly, the paper stiff, smelling faintly of printer ink. "I'm fine here," I said at last, though my voice barely carried over the hum of the fridge. Tom leaned back in his chair, folding his arms. "You can't keep this place up forever. It's too much for you." I stared at the folder between us, at his hands resting so easily on the table. The same hands that once built a treehouse with me in the backyard, hammering nails with more energy than skill. Now they pushed papers like a salesman. When he left, the folder remained. I pushed it to the far end of the counter, then wrote in the notepad, "Papers for condo." Pressure rising. That night I lay in bed, the album under my pillow, the folder still waiting in the kitchen. The house ticked and groaned, restless with me. The next morning, Josh arrived early. Too early. He walked straight to the sink, filling the kettle like he lived here. His tone was light, but his words were sharp. "We've been talking, Dad. You'd be better off somewhere safe. We could handle everything here. The bills, the upkeep. You wouldn't have to worry." I watched the steam rise from the kettle, curling in the air between us. "This is my home," I said. He gave me a look, something between pity and annoyance. "Just think about it." When he left, I opened the photo album again. My notes slipped from between the pages, fluttering onto the table. I gathered them, held them in my hands like something fragile. Through the window, I saw the Johnsons stringing Christmas lights across their porch. Their kids ran back and forth, untangling wires, laughter carrying in the cold air. My own house stayed dark. I saw more of life through glass than I did on the street. I pressed the notes back into the album and closed it. My hands shook as I did, not from cold, from knowing I was running out of time. The folder stayed on the counter for days. I didn't touch it, but I felt its presence each time I walked past, the edges of the papers sharp against the quiet. One evening, I found it open, not where I'd left it. The pages spread like wings, the photographs of tidy condos staring up at me. I closed it slowly, the sound of paper stiff in my ears. Someone had been in the house again. I wrote it down. Folder opened. Not me. The words looked strange in my own handwriting, as if I were accusing myself. That night, I heard footsteps outside. Slow, deliberate, on the porch boards that creaked under weight. I sat in the dark living room, holding the album in my lap, listening. The sound stopped. The silence after was worse. In the morning, the porch light was tilted, the bulb unscrewed halfway. I touched it, felt the chill of the metal. I didn't write that one down. Some things were too heavy for the page. Later that week, Josh came with Tom. They arrived together, carrying grocery bags like a performance. Milk, bread, a carton of eggs placed neatly on the counter. "You can't keep up with all this, Dad," Tom said, his voice practiced. I nodded, watching their movements. Their eyes lingered on the corners of the room, on the furniture, on the pictures still hanging. Inventory. When they left, the bags remained half full. They had taken more than they brought. I opened the drawer again. Lighter. Always lighter. I sat at the table, the smell of bread still warm in the air, and pressed the notepad flat. "They want me gone," I wrote. The pen slipped slightly, the ink pooling where my hand shook. Through the window, the Miller kids built a snowman, their laughter bright against the white lawn. I watched their mother place a scarf around its neck, her cheeks red from the cold. I pressed the album shut, hard. My hand stayed on it long after, as if I could pin the past in place by force. That night, I locked every door twice, and for the first time, I slid a chair against the handle. The chair against the door didn't stop me from waking every hour. I lay in the dark, listening to the house breathe. The tick of the hallway clock, the hum of the refrigerator, the occasional groan of the floorboards. Each sound felt sharper now, cutting into the silence. In the morning, I left the chair where it was, a small monument to my unease. Sunlight slanted through the blinds, dust drifting in the beam. The house looked normal, but it didn't feel like mine anymore. By afternoon, Josh returned. He glanced at the chair, then at me, his smile thinner than usual. "Paranoid much?" he asked, half a laugh, half something colder. I didn't answer. Instead, I watched him circle the kitchen, his hand brushing over the folder still on the counter. He opened the fridge, stared inside longer than necessary, then closed it with a sigh. "You're not eating enough," he said. His tone was light, but his eyes weren't. He was saving the pressure for later. I could see it. When he left, the house carried his presence like an aftertaste. The smell of his cologne, the faint echo of his laugh. I opened a window, the cold air biting against my skin, just to feel like the space was mine again. Across the street, the Millers were shoveling snow together. Their son tossed a handful at his father, both of them laughing as it scattered. I stood at my own window, hands deep in my pockets, a ghost watching through glass. That night, I sat with the photo album open. The notes pressed flat between the pages, heavier now than the photographs themselves. I wrote another line on the pad. Josh saw the chair. My handwriting slanted, the ink blotted where my hand shook. I set the pen down, listening to the silence. The house smelled faintly of stale bread, the kind left too long on the counter. I turned another page of the album, past birthdays, vacations, school plays. Their mother smiling in every one. Her eyes seemed to follow me now, as if asking what I was doing, what I was waiting for. I closed the album slowly, pressing it shut with both hands. And for the first time, I wondered if I wasn't just recording history, but building a defense. The thought stayed with me through the night. A defense. The word repeated in my head until it no longer sounded like English. I lay staring at the ceiling. The crack above the bed jagged like a scar. By morning, my decision felt heavier than the album itself. I gathered the notepad, the slips of paper, even the folder Tom had left, and placed them all together inside an old shoebox. The cardboard smelled of dust and leather polish, relics of shoes I hadn't worn in years. I slid the box under the bed, far back against the wall. Not hidden well, but hidden enough. That afternoon, both boys came together. No groceries this time, no excuses. Tom spoke first, his voice low and careful. "We've been talking, Dad. You can't keep this up alone." Josh nodded, arms crossed. "It's not safe for you here." I noticed the way they positioned themselves, Tom at the table, Josh leaning against the counter, blocking the path to the back door. Small details, but I saw them. "I've managed fine," I said. My own voice sounded strange to me, thinner than theirs, but steady. Tom slid the folder closer again, tapping the cover. "These places are good. Better than this drafty house. You'd have your own room, your meals, people your age." I didn't look at the pages. I looked at his hands. The nails trimmed short, the fingers drumming on the paper like a countdown. When they left, the air felt bruised. I stayed seated at the table long after, staring at the folder they'd abandoned like a trap baited too obviously. Through the window, the Johnson kids skated on the frozen patch of their driveway, their laughter carrying sharp through the cold. I closed the blinds. That night, I pulled the shoebox back out, opened it, on the bed. The notepad, the slips, the folder evidence scattered across the quilt. I needed to see it all again, to make sure it hadn't slipped away in the dark. My handwriting wavered under the lamplight, names and dates, numbers and phrases. I traced the words with my finger, as if memorizing my own testimony. The house was silent, too silent. Even the refrigerator seemed to hold its breath. I pressed the lid back onto the box and slid it under again. This time, I placed the chair against the door before turning out the light. The chair against the door gave me no peace. I woke before dawn. The sky still black, the house colder than it should have been. I walked from room to room, touching the walls, the frames, the corners, as if making sure they were still mine. In the kitchen, the folder was gone. The counter bare, except for a ring of dust where it had been. My chest tightened. I checked the table, the drawers, the trash. Nothing. I wrote it down. Folder missing. Not me. The words looked stark, final. By mid-morning, Josh called. His voice was cheerful, too cheerful. "Don't worry about the folder, Dad. We've got it. We'll handle the details." I held the phone so tight my knuckles ached. "You took it," I said. He laughed lightly. "You'll thank us later." Then, he hung up. I sat at the table long after, the silence heavier than the call itself. The refrigerator hummed back to life, the sound almost mocking. Outside, a delivery truck pulled up to the Miller house. The driver whistled as he carried a package to their porch. Their youngest opened the door, clapping at the sight of a box bigger than she was. I turned away. That evening, I pulled the shoebox from under the bed again. I lifted the lid, counted every page, every note. Still there. My proof. My only ground. I slid the album beside it, then closed the box tight. Together they felt heavier, like an anchor. When I pushed it back under the bed, my hand lingered on the cardboard. For the first time, I wondered if hiding was enough. That night, I didn't just place the chair against the door. I dragged the dresser in front of it too. The wood scraped loud against the floor, the sound echoing through the house like a warning. The dresser against the door left deep scratches in the wood. I stared at them in the morning light, pale grooves across the floorboards like scars I couldn't sand away. The phone rang not long after. Tom, this time. His voice was steady, businesslike. "We've made some calls, Dad. It's better this way. Less stress for you." I asked him what he meant. He hesitated only a second. "The realtor will stop by tomorrow, just to take a look." I gripped the receiver until my hand shook. "This is my house," I said. But the line was already dead. I set the phone down gently, though every part of me wanted to slam it. The silence after felt sharp, the ticking clock too loud in the kitchen. I thought of calling the police, of telling them my sons were circling like vultures. But what would I say? The police wouldn't care about a missing folder or a chair against a door. They'd call it family business and leave me with the silence. So I wrote it down. Realtor tomorrow. Not my choice. The pen dug so hard into the page, it nearly tore. By noon, the neighbors were stringing more lights, bright colors blinking against the snow. Music drifted faintly from a radio, cheerful, careless. I closed the blinds again. I walked the house slowly, each step echoing. I touched the door frames, the photographs, the old curtains my wife had sewn years ago. Every object was a witness. Every wall held a memory. That evening, I pulled the shoebox out once more. I added a new sheet, my handwriting tight and slanted. They want me gone. I placed the box on the dresser instead of under the bed. Leaving it there felt dangerous, but hiding it felt worse. The house smelled faintly of cold dust and wood polish, the air heavy, expectant. Before bed, I dragged the dresser tighter against the door. The sound scraped louder this time, reverberating through the walls like a message. And as I lay down, I realized it was no longer just a defense. It was a barricade. The barricade stood all night. I lay awake, listening to the dresser settle against the door, the wood creaking like an old man's breath. Every sound carried weight: the groan of the furnace, the tick of the pipes, the rustle of the wind against the siding. At dawn, I sat at the table, the shoebox open beside me. The papers fanned out across the wood like evidence laid before a jury. My jury, my defense. The realtor never came. Not that morning. Not that afternoon. Maybe they had postponed. Maybe my sons had planned it for another day. But the waiting was its own trial. By evening, I made my choice. I gathered the notes, the folder, the album, and placed them all back inside the shoebox. Then I took the envelope I had prepared weeks before, heavy with papers of its own. I drove into town under a sky turning pink with sunset. The streets were busy with holiday traffic, headlights glinting on wet pavement. Couples hurried from store to store, arms full of bags. The world was alive, moving forward. I parked outside the office with the blue awning, the one that read Community Shelter Fund. Inside, the air smelled of coffee and printer ink. A woman at the desk looked up, surprised to see me at that hour. I placed the envelope down. My hands didn't shake this time. "For the shelter," I said. My voice sounded steady, almost calm. She opened it, glanced at the papers. "Deed transfer," signed and notarized. "Are you sure?" she asked. "I'm sure," I said. Driving home, the town lights blurred in the windshield. For the first time in months, I didn't feel hunted. When I reached the house, it was dark. The barricade still in place. The walls still holding the silence. I carried the shoebox to the bedroom and set it on the dresser. The weight of it seemed lighter now. Through the window, I saw the Miller's house glowing with lights, their children's laughter carrying faintly across the snow. I listened, not with envy this time, but with a strange peace. I had given my sons nothing they wanted, and everything they feared. Thank you for watching Final Truth. Your support means the world to us. If this story kept you hooked until the end, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Every day we bring you new tales of family secrets, hidden motives, and twists you won't see coming. Turn on notifications so you never miss the moment the truth comes out. And remember, here at Final Truth, every ending is just the start of another story.